said no and kicked out my insolent brother and his wife after they lived in my house for 1 year, but parents supported them until I shocked them with the painful truth. When my brother Lucas first asked me if he and Linda could stay with me for a while, I didn't hesitate to say yes. He's my older brother, after all, and I figured helping him through a tough time was just what family does. Lucas has always been the kind of guy who seemed larger than life. Even when we were kids, he'd walk into a room like he owned it. But life had obviously humbled him, or so I thought at the time. He explained that he was between a rock and a hard place. His business had gone under, he was drowning in debt, and to top it off, their house had been foreclosed on. I could see the weight on his face as he told me. Linda stood silently by his side, looking embarrassed. She'd been working remotely as a bookkeeper, but they were barely scraping by. Lucas assured me this was temporary, just until he got back on his feet. I had a spare room, and the house felt big and quiet with just me in it, so I figured, why not? At first, I was even excited. It had been years since we'd spent any real time together, and Linda was sweet. It was almost like having roommates again, something I hadn't experienced since college. The first few months were surprisingly good. Lucas didn't have a job yet, but he was optimistic, saying he was in the process of lining something up. Linda worked from home, and they'd taken it upon themselves to cook or clean up sometimes. It felt like a fair exchange. And frankly, it was nice to come home to people instead of an empty house. They had their quirks, though. Lucas always had big ideas, and he'd start talking about elaborate plans to start a new business or invest in something. He dragged me into late-night brainstorming sessions, tossing around half-baked ideas while I tried to politely bring him back to reality. Linda was quieter, but had a way of subtly hinting that her stay might last longer than expected. Still, I didn't mind too much. That began to change after about 4 months. Lucas was still unemployed and Linda was constantly complaining about her job. They started taking liberties in ways I hadn't expected. My refrigerator was always empty because Lucas had apparently decided that I should stock it for 3 people. Linda rearranged my living room without asking, claiming it had better feng shui. And then there were the arguments, loud, protracted fights about money or who did more around the house. I let it go, thinking it was just a rough patch. But the cracks were beginning to show, and I had no idea how much worse it was going to get. By the 5th month, I was beginning to feel like a guest in my own home. Lucas and Linda had this uncanny ability to take over every inch of the room. It wasn't just a living room, they had gradually spread to every nook and cranny. My garage, which had been relatively organized, had become a storage area for their necessities that they couldn't part with. Boxes of random junk piled up, and I couldn't park my car without squeezing past a mountain of old clothes and broken appliances. The little things I used to overlook were starting to get to me. Lucas would leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, promising to clean them later. Linda had taken to monopolizing the kitchen table for her work during the day, spreading her papers and laptop across the entire surface as if she were running a corporate office. On weekends, they would watch TV for hours on my couch, leaving empty snack bags everywhere. Then there were the money issues. At first, I didn't mind picking up a few extra groceries or paying the utility bills, which had predictably skyrocketed with 2 extra people living there full-time. But then Lucas started borrowing money. It was always small amounts, at first 20 here, 40 there, and he promised to pay me back next week when he got a job. I wanted to believe him. After all, he's my brother. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that Lucas wasn't making much of an effort to find work. It wasn't just the money, though. They began to treat the house as if they owned it. Linda took it upon herself to fix things that weren't broken, replacing perfectly good curtains with ones she liked better, rearranging furniture in ways that made no sense, and even painting a wall in the guest room without asking. I came home one day to find her halfway through painting it a strange shade of green. When I asked why, she just shrugged and said she thought it would make the room feel more homey. One night I came home from work exhausted, looking forward to a quiet dinner and some TV. Instead, I walked into what looked like a dinner party. Lucas and Linda had invited their friends over without telling me. The kitchen was a mess of dirty dishes, and they were using my expensive whiskey like it was soda. I tried to play it cool, but I was seething inside. When I finally pulled Lucas aside to tell him it wasn't okay, he just laughed and said, "Relax, man, it's just one night." But it wasn't just one night. It was a pattern. The breaking point came when Linda lost her online accounting job. Suddenly, I was supporting both of them completely. They started asking for more money this time, not even pretending it was a loan. Lucas said he needed help with their phone bills, car insurance, even food. I started staying late at work, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stand coming home to them. I was at my limit, but the idea of kicking them out felt impossible. They were family. I told myself I'd wait it out, hoping Lucas would come around. But deep down I knew that wasn't going to happen. Little did I know that their entitlement would soon reach a new level, and that when I finally drew the line, it would tear the family apart. By the 8th month, my wife, Emily, and my teenage son, Ryan, had officially reached their breaking point. I could see it on their faces every day, the anger, the frustration, and the underlying question they wouldn't say out loud: when is this going to end? At first, Emily was as understanding as I was. "It's your brother," she'd said when Lucas and Linda first moved in. "We can handle it for a while." She even tried to make the best of it, chatting with Linda during her downtime and trying to include her in family dinners. But the novelty wore off quickly. Linda had a way of talking to Emily that grated on her nerves. It wasn't outright rude, but it was condescending in that subtle way that made every conversation feel like a power struggle. She'd criticize Emily's cooking, suggest better ways to organize our pantry, and once even made a snide comment about how Emily's parenting style was a little too lenient. Emily was furious after that. Ryan, on the other hand, couldn't stand Lucas. My brother treated him like a kid who didn't know anything, constantly making sarcastic remarks about his interests or telling him to put down the video games and do something useful. Ryan started spending most of his time in his room, and when I asked him about it, he just said, "Why bother coming out? They're always in there, hogging everything." The breaking point for Emily came one Saturday morning. She had planned to bake cookies with Ryan, it was their little tradition. But when she walked into the kitchen, Linda was already there, using every inch of counter space to prepare an elaborate meal for her and Lucas. Emily tried to be polite, but Linda waved her off, saying, "Oh, you can do that later. We're going to be in here for a while." Emily came into the living room where I was sitting and said, "I'm done. This has to stop." At dinner that night, Ryan, who had been mostly quiet about the whole situation, chimed in. "Dad, seriously, why are they even here? It's been almost a year. They're taking over everything. It doesn't even feel like our house anymore." I tried to defuse the situation by saying something like, "It's only temporary, guys. Lucas is trying to figure things out." Emily cut me off. "No, he's not. He's not doing anything. And meanwhile, we're paying for everything, dealing with their drama, and it's like they've forgotten that this isn't their home. They have to go." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, it's not fair to us. You always say that family is important, but what about our family? When are you going to put us first?" Hearing that hit me hard. I had been so focused on not disappointing Lucas that I hadn't realized how much it was costing the people who mattered most to me. I told Emily and Ryan I'd handle it, but the thought of confronting Lucas made my stomach turn. It took me almost a month to work up the nerve. By then, things had gotten worse. Lucas had started asking for cash outright, no promises to pay it back, no excuses, just, "Hey, can you spot me a couple $100?" Linda wasn't much better, acting like I owed them a comfortable lifestyle just because I had one. I decided to give them until Lucas' birthday to get their act together or pack their bags. Little did I know that the fallout would be even worse than I imagined. Lucas' 42nd birthday fell on a Friday. Emily and Ryan weren't exactly in the mood to celebrate, but I decided to keep it low-key, a small dinner at home, just the 5 of us. It felt like the right time to address the elephant in the room. We ate, and Lucas spent most of it talking about some business opportunity he was considering. Linda chimed in, saying they just needed a little more time and support to make it happen. Emily barely touched her food, Ryan didn't say a word, and I sat there stewing. After dinner, I asked Lucas to join me in the living room. Linda tried to join me, but I told her it was just between us. I could tell by the look on her face that she didn't like it. Once we were alone, I didn't sugarcoat it. Lucas, this isn't working anymore. You and Linda have to move out. He blinked at me, stunned. What are you talking about? We're a family. You can't just kick us out. I've been more than patient, I said. It's been a year. You haven't found a job, and Linda isn't working. You're not even trying to help yourselves. I can't carry both of you anymore. Lucas scoffed, leaning back on the couch as if I was the one being unreasonable. So what, you're just going to kick us out on my birthday? Real classy. I've put up with a lot, I said, my voice firm. The money, the fights, the way you've disrespected my home. It's not fair to Emily or Ryan. They've had enough. I've had enough. His face turned red and he began to fire back. You don't get it, do you? I'm struggling, and you act like it's no big deal. What kind of brother are you? I'm the kind of brother who let you live here rent-free for a year. I shot back. The kind who gave you every opportunity to turn things around and you didn't. This isn't about me being cold or selfish, it's about you not taking responsibility. Before Lucas could respond, Linda stormed in, clearly having overheard the conversation. Wow, she said, glaring at me. Just wow. You're kicking us out? After all we've been through? You're heartless. I stood my ground. You have 2 weeks. That's more than enough time to figure something out. Lucas shook his head, mumbled something, and Linda stormed out of the room. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. That night, Emily came up to me and asked how it had gone. When I told her they had 2 weeks, she sighed with relief. Finally, she said. But Lucas and Linda weren't going to make it easy. The 2 weeks I gave Lucas and Linda to move out felt like the longest of my life. They didn't make it easy. Linda walked around the house like a martyr, slamming doors and muttering under her breath about how families should stick together. Lucas avoided me entirely, but when he did talk, it was to Emily or Ryan, trying to guilt them. You know, your dad's being a little extreme about this. I overheard him telling Ryan one night. We're a family. Don't you think families should help each other out? Ryan didn't say much, he just nodded politely and walked away, but I could tell it was getting to him. Emily, on the other hand, didn't even pretend to be polite. She kept her distance, but when Linda started nitpicking her cooking again, Emily finally snapped. Maybe you should spend less time complaining and more time packing. That shut Linda up, at least for the moment. The night before they left, Lucas made a big show of sitting us all down for what he called one last family dinner. He insisted on cooking, which was rare. The food was decent, but the atmosphere was tense. Lucas made a speech about how hard things had been for them and how grateful they were for my hospitality, although the way he said it made it sound like he thought I owed it to them. Linda added, I hope you never find yourself in our shoes. It's not as easy as you think. The next morning, they packed up their things, which turned out to be more than I realized, considering how much of my garage they'd taken over and left without much fanfare. Lucas didn't even say goodbye to me, and Linda barely looked at Emily. As they drove away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. But that wasn't the end of it, of course. Within days, my parents were calling me nonstop, asking me how I could abandon Lucas and Linda in their time of need. Apparently, Lucas had spun some sob story about how I'd heartlessly kicked them out without warning, and my parents bought it hook, line, and sinker. You know how hard it was for her, my mother said during one of those calls. How could you do that to your own brother? I tried to explain the truth, that they had plenty of time, that they weren't trying to help themselves, and that their behavior was intolerable, but my parents wouldn't hear it. Family takes care of family, my father said firmly. For a while, I felt like the bad guy in the family. My parents wouldn't talk to me without bringing up Lucas, and they began to imply that I should have done more to help him. Lucas and Linda had moved into a cheap apartment in a neighboring town, but they made it sound like they were living in a Dickensian slum. I tried to move on and focus on my own family, but Lucas wasn't done dragging my name through the mud. What I didn't know was that his lies were about to catch up with him in a way that none of us saw coming. About a month after Lucas and Linda moved out, I thought things would calm down. They didn't. My parents were still on my case every chance they got, treating me like a heartless monster who had turned his back on his own brother. Emily told me to let it go, but it was hard not to feel bitter about how Lucas had twisted the truth. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from a man named Brian. He introduced himself as a former coworker of Lucas's from his old company. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, "but I think you should know something." What Brian told me stunned me. Apparently, Lucas hadn't just been unlucky or fallen on hard times, he'd burned bridges everywhere he went. His business had failed not because of bad luck or the economy, but because he'd been skimming money off the top. He'd made shady deals, stiffed suppliers, and left his employees unpaid when it all went down. "He ruined a lot of people's lives," Brian said. "I thought you might want to know, you're his brother." I thanked him for telling me, though at first I wasn't sure what to do with the information. I spent the rest of the day stewing over it, replaying every interaction I'd had with Lucas over the past year. Suddenly, all of his excuses and sob stories made sense. But the real bombshell came a few days later. My mom called and said someone had come to her house looking for Lucas. "He said he was an investigator or something," she explained, sounding nervous. "He wanted to know if we knew where Lucas was. Do you know anything about it?" I told her I didn't, but suggested they might want to have a serious talk with Lucas. That's when I decided it was time to set the record straight. The next weekend, I drove over to my parents' house to talk to them in person. Emily and Ryan stayed home. I wanted to handle this on my own. When I got there, my mom immediately started on me about Lucas again. "You're the only one who could have helped him, but instead you kicked him out." I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told them everything: how Lucas and Linda had treated my house like their personal playground, how they'd refused to help themselves, and finally, what Brian had told me about Lucas's business dealings. At first they didn't believe me. My dad even said, "That doesn't sound like Lucas." But then I showed them the messages I'd received from Brian, detailing everything Lucas had done. Their faces turned pale. "I didn't want to do this," I said, "but you're blaming me for something that wasn't my fault. Lucas isn't some innocent victim. He used everyone around him, including me." My mother was silent for a long time, but my father finally spoke. "If this is true, then Lucas has a lot to answer for." That was the beginning of the end for Lucas and Linda's family. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart for Lucas and Linda. When my parents confronted him with what I had told them, he didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he doubled down and blamed everyone else for his failures. "You don't know what it's like to be me," he yelled, according to my father. "No one helped me when I needed it." That was the last straw for my parents. They'd supported him emotionally, financially, and defended him against me for months, and now they saw the truth. Lucas wasn't a victim, he was just entitled. Word spread quickly through the family. Once my parents told the truth about Lucas' shady business dealings and how he manipulated everyone, no one wanted anything to do with him or Linda. A cousin who had loaned Lucas money years ago called me and said, "I always thought there was something wrong with him. Thank you for telling us." One by one, everyone distanced themselves from him. Lucas and Linda became pariahs. Even the friends they'd once invited to my house stopped returning their calls. They were stuck in their dingy apartment, no longer able to count on anyone's goodwill. As for me, things got better almost immediately. My parents apologized sincerely for not believing me sooner. My mother even came over with a home-cooked meal, something she hadn't done in years. "We're proud of you," she said, "for standing up for yourself and your family." Hearing that felt like a weight lifted off my chest. Emily and Ryan were thriving as well. Without the constant tension in the house, our family felt closer than ever. Ryan spent more time with us, and Emily and I even began planning a long overdue family vacation. One night, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me and said, "You did the right thing. It may have been hard, but you stood up for us." And she was right. For a long time I'd felt guilty about asking Lucas and Linda to leave, but now I realized it was necessary for my sanity, for my family, and even for Lucas. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, even if it meant losing everyone. The last I heard, Lucas was working odd jobs and trying to keep a low profile. Linda had left him, apparently fed up with the life they'd ended up living. A part of me felt sorry for him, but only a small part. As for me, I've never felt more at peace. My house is mine again, my family is happy, and I've learned an important lesson: family is important, but so is knowing when to say enough is enough. About 6 months after everything settled down, I was in the grocery store getting some things for dinner when I spotted Lucas. He was standing in the frozen food aisle, staring at a rack of microwave dinners. He looked different. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was unkempt, and there was a weariness in his posture that I hadn't seen before. He saw me before I could turn around. For a moment I thought he might walk over, but instead he just nodded an awkward, almost apologetic gesture. I nodded back, not sure what else to do. As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: pity, sadness, and perhaps a tiny bit of satisfaction. I didn't wish him any harm, but it was clear that he had finally been forced to face the consequences of his actions. This encounter stayed with me for a while, but I didn't dwell on it. My life was good now, and I wasn't going to let Lucas pull me back into his orbit. Whatever happened to him next was out of my hands. Some doors are better left shut.